Today we are continuing on in Unfinished Tales with Aldarion and Erendis, the Mariner's Wife. If you're new here, welcome to Heart of a Halfling, where we talk about Lord of the Rings and do some Lord of the Ring things. So let's get started. So today we're going through Aldarion and Erendis. And this is Tolkien's failed marriage. This is a story about two people who had no business getting married to one another. And a lot happens in this section. I mean, a lot of little things that sort of just add to the story. But if I sat here and told you every little thing that occurred, it would take me 2 hours to tell the story. And I know that because I've tried. So I'm going to try and keep this as condensed as possible because ultimately, this is just a classic tale of two people who have no business getting married to one another, hoping to fix the other person. So let's get started. Aldarion is obviously our main guy for the story. He is the son of Meneldor and of Amarion. Now, Darian has two sisters. They don't come into the story, so we're not going to worry too much about it. The main thing that we need to know is that Aldarion from a very early age has a love for the sea. And his grandfather, Viantur, the father of Amarion, lives in Romena. And anywhere that Viantur wants to go, he's taken a boat. And so at a very young age, Aldarion is spending a lot of time with Viantur. And by the time he's in his early 20s, Aldarion knows how to man a ship. He knows how to be a captain, how to tell men what needs to be done. He knows the ins and outs of a ship. It is what he has basically been raised on. And for the most part, Meneldor and Amarion don't really push this desire out. Meneldor doesn't necessarily encourage it like Amarion does, but they just see it as a childish dream and sort of, why not? It's not hurting anybody. Well, Aldarion is coming of age at 25, and so he's getting close to that. And so he's talking with Viantor, his grandfather, about how he wants to do his birthday, how he wants to bring in his coming of age. And Viantor is like, well, I've got a good idea. How about we sail to Middle Earth and I can introduce you to Círdan and King Gilgalad, and you'll learn all these new things and see all these new places. It will be so good for you. That's an awesome way to bring in your 25th year. And Aldarion's like, yeah, that's a great idea. So he goes to Meneldor, and Meneldor is like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't really like that idea." But between Aldarion, Umarion, and Viantur, Meneldor kind of gets worked down. He's like, "Okay, fine. You can go. Just don't stay gone for too long." And so, Aldarion leaves and goes on his trip, and he's gone for 4 years. Now, when he returns, uh, his sisters at one point are asking him, like, what did you see? How was it? All of these things. And Aldarion gives like really vague answers to these questions. He did end up learning a lot. He meets Círdan, he meets Gilgalad. He spends a lot of time with Círdan, especially during this time when he learns how to build better ships. Círdan kind of mentors him during these few years that they're there. But he's telling his sisters all just kind of like gazing out the window. I saw elves and mountains and I don't know. But he's just looking off to the sea. And it's here that Meneldor realizes, oh no, Aldarion doesn't have a desire for voyaging or seeing new places. He has a desire for the sea. He realizes in this moment that if Aldarion could make a wish and live anywhere he wanted with, no issues of legalities. He would live in the middle of the sea with no land in sight. And so this now is concerning for Meneldor because he's becoming king, and that means Aldarion is heir to the throne. And so he's like, oh no, what have I done? I've allowed my son, I've indulged my son's desire for this maybe a little too long. So this kind of begins this back and forth uh, discord between Aldarion and Meneldor. Well, Aldarion is going to want to be at sea, and Meneldor is going to be constantly calling him back. And we see a few years later that when Meneldor does become king, he proclaims Aldarion as heir to the throne and allows Aldarion to find the Guild Adventurers. Now, this is going to be a group of men who Aldarion teaches how to uh, harvest timber, how to build ships, and how to replant trees and just cycle and repeat. And these are going to be the men who have the strongest desire to go sailing. And they're going to be kind of a tight knit group with Aldarion being uh, the captain. So Viantor isn't going to be taking any more voyages. He's of an older age, but Aldarion's going to continue to take voyages. So he's going to take another 7-year voyage from 806 to 813. And then he's going to take his first voyage of the Peleron from 816 to 820. Now, during this time, when Aldarion is going to be proclaimed heir to the throne, there's going to be this big celebration. And in the celebration, we are going to have the House of Bior come. And of the House of Bior, we have Erendis. And Aldarion's mother, is going to see Erendis and say, she is real pretty. Maybe she'll catch Aldarion's eye, and that will be enough to keep Aldarion here in Numenor. So Amarion, the queen, goes up to Erendis and, meets the family, introduces herself. It's this nice little meeting. And then she asks Erendis, do you want to stay with us? Do you want to live here with the king and I in Armenelos? And she's from Andunie, so the other side of the island. And Arendis is like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Now, it is a party for Aldarion, so she sees Aldarion and recognizes that he is a very attractive man. And now she's getting this invitation to live with the king and queen. So she's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So, for quite a while, Arendis is going to be living with the king and queen. However, in hopes of meeting Aldarion, she doesn't actually get to see him for a very long time because Aldarion is off dealing with the guild adventurers. He's off doing his thing. And the king actually gets on to Amarion at one point, and he's like, it would have been better for us to remove this desire from Aldarion before bringing in somebody else. And Amarion, the queen, is like, well, how else are we going to get our son to stay here on land? And so she's meddling in hearts. Well, Aldarion's sister goes, time is really not on y'all's side on this. So during the writing of this particular story, Tolkien had a had designed the lives of Numenors differently than what we see in later tellings. So later we see that all the Dunedain live for 400 years. But at this point, only the line of Elros lives to be 400 years. Every other house that was blessed lives only for 200 years. So Aldarion's going to get to live for 400 years, but Arendis is only going to get to live for 200 years. So time is not on their side on any of this. And which we're going to see kind of be brought up a lot when it comes to Aldarion needing to hurry up and settle down, and Erendis being told, like, hey, your clock's ticking. You need to hurry up and get married and pop out a couple of babies. So it's going to be a bit of an issue. Well, Aldarion's off doing his thing, right? And when the two finally, like, actually meet, it is at the docks of Aldarion leaving to go on his voyage. And which is just insane to me. And so we see here the queen and Erendis have come to bless the vessel on their voyage. And the queen asks Aldarion, is there nothing that's gonna, that will keep you here? And here, Aldarion finally, like, actually stops to look at Erendis and says, like, it says that he finds her very attractive. But that's it. And he just tells his mom, like, well, no, I still have this desire. I'm not ready to settle down right now. Like, it wouldn't be fair to settle down. Like, I want to go on voyage. That's what I'm gonna go do. But he says, like, he makes this kind of comment of, like, "Not yet," and Horrendous thinks that that's about her, which is just so from this point on, Horrendous is like, "Aldarion likes me, and I'm going to remain here forever." Even though Aldarion has, like, maybe slightly suggested that she's attractive, but has blatantly said, "I don't want to settle down right now. I'm going to go voyage." And apparently that's what Erendis wants. I don't. So he goes off on his voyage. When he comes back, there's some back and forth between him and Meneldor, and Meneldor's like, "You need to stay here," and Aldarion's like, "No, I want to go sailing, so that's what I'm gonna go do." And now we have the like forbidden, defiant voyage of Aldarion leaving. And he's going to be gone for 4 years on this voyage. I'm sorry, 5 years on this voyage. And then he's going to return, and immediately he's going to leave again. And this time, he's going to leave and be gone for 14 years. 14 years. Because when he came back from the Defiance voyage, nobody was there to greet him. The king was all like mad that he had left. Obviously it was the Defiance. And Aldarion's gonna be like, well, I'm just gonna leave again. So he does for 14 years. And he goes back to Middle Earth. So during his Defiance voyage, when he was in Middle Earth, he created this little colony called Vinyalonde. And here is where he was planting trees and harvesting trees and building ships. So now during this 14-year voyage, he's back over there doing it again, just making his thing. And when he returned after 14 years, right? Mind you, Arendis has been living with the king and queen during most of this time. She thinks Aldarion is loves her because of that one slight statement that he said to his mother almost 20 years ago. And she's been living with the king and queen. Now, towards the end of that 14 years, she's finally like, okay, either he's died or he's staying in Middle Earth, so I'm gonna go home. But she doesn't marry anybody else. She's only got eyes on Aldarion, and if Aldarion doesn't want her, then she doesn't want to be with anybody else. So she leaves. Well, Aldarion finally comes home after that 14-year voyage, and him and the king make up, and the king's like, you know, obviously sad that his son was gone for so long. And so they make up and they make friends. And now Aldarion needs to start setting up his harvesting that he had established beforehand here in Numenor. He's got to reset that all up because he's been gone for so long and nobody's been there to tend to all of the lumber. So here he realizes, oh, Erendis isn't around, so that's kind of That kind of sucks, but it's fine. And he's kind of going about his business. And then one day he sees somebody riding by and he's like, that looks a lot like Erendis. So he goes after her. He goes after her. And then they kind of get to talking with one another. The queen starts like setting them up a little bit more often. And so now they think that they're in love, even though the whole time that they're together, Aldarion is like, hey, will you come sailing with me? I can make this beautiful houseboat, which he does. He makes his beautiful houseboat, and he's like, hey, why don't you come sailing with me? And Arendis is like, no, I hate the sea. I want to go live in a Mediate, which, if you don't remember from the description, it is a land, like an inland part of Numenor that is all pastures. It's where the sheep reside, and there is no sea in sight. So that's where she wants to be, and he wants to live on a houseboat. And so the two are like, hey, we are a match made in heaven. This sounds great. So now, in the year 858, they get engaged. And Aldarion's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have like a ring to give you or whatever, as an engagement gift. And Arendis is like, oh no, it's okay. You gave me a gift years ago, which he did when he came back from one of his trips. He gave her a diamond. And she's like, that is my engagement gift, which it's like, that was before he even wanted to get married. You were just really nice to him. So he gave you a diamond, which Meneldor did say, like, that is an engagement gift that you only give someone you're going to marry. And that is how Arendis took it. And so now, in the year of 858, they get engaged. This is 50 years after they have first met. 50 years this woman has been waiting for him to propose. Now he does. And in Numenorian tradition, an engagement lasts no longer than 3 years. Their engagement lasts for 12. 12 years. And Meneldor kind of gets onto him for this. Arendis is kind of getting onto him for this. And in the year of 863, Aldarion's like, I've got to go sailing. They're still betrothed. They're still engaged. They have not gotten married yet. And he's like, I need to go on one more trip. I just have to get it out of my system. So he goes on this trip. And it lasts 3 years longer than he anticipated. So he's gone for 6 years. During the 6 years, he goes to Middle Earth. When he's coming back, he gets caught in a storm and it takes them way off course. And so they have to like work their way back to Numenor, which is why it was such a long trip. Okay. So they get back. Aldarion goes after Erendis and asks her, I totally understand if you don't want to, but do you still want to get married? And she says, yes. She's like, and she's been mad this whole time, but she sees him and she's like, oh, I love you. Yes, I'll marry you. And so in the spring of 870, they are finally married. And there's some stuff that happens at the wedding, couple wedding gifts that they get. We're not going to get into it. Moving on. So they get married and they have a home in Armenelos, but then they also have a home in Amediate, which is where Arendis wants to live. So he makes a home here. No sea in sight. You can't even hear the seagulls. You can't hear any of the birds, which are so loud at the coast. You can't hear that here. No ocean breeze smell, no nothing. He's out here in the middle of the field with his beloved. And shortly after getting married, they have a daughter in the year 873 named Ancalame. And so now Arendis is like, I've got my man. I have a daughter now. Surely now he'll want to try again for a son, and that'll lock him in. Now, as a side note, Arendis's mother had told her, hey, you are marrying a king, yes, but you are also marrying a mariner, which is something that Meneldor kind of gets onto Aldarion at one point of like, you're not a mariner by trade. You're a king by trade. You don't have to go and do this. But Aldarion's like, no, I was meant to be a mariner. So it's a whole issue. So Arendis's mother is saying, like, hey, you know this is who you're marrying. He loves to sail. He loves the sea. You have to take an interest in what he loves. Otherwise, you're going to become resentful of one another and you're not going to love the same person anymore. Apparently, that message went right over Arendis's head, and she's like, no, I want him to stay here. So now here's the problem. For from 869 to the spring of 877, Aldarion is on land, does not sail. He has put his desires for sailing aside. He's in the honeymoon phase essentially of his wedding, but that's starting to wane. And Calame is 4 years old, and he tells Arendis, I want to go sailing just one more time. Just let me go. And she's like, no. If you sail, it is not with my blessing. And this is an issue when it comes to sailing. The captain or the one of the higher ranks on the ship, usually the captain, their spouse, or if they're not married, their mother, some close female relation, brings a branch to tie on to the ship as a blessing, as like telling Unanin, hey, this vessel has been blessed. Don't hurt them. Don't let Ose get them. She's telling him, you don't get my blessing. So if you want to go, just go. I know you're not asking me. Mind you, Aldarion has asked her, hey, come with me. Come with me. I built this huge ship for like to house a wonderful queen. Come with me. And she's like, nope, I ain't doing it. You're going to stay here or you're just gonna be off on your own. And he's like, well, fine. This is what I'm gonna do, and this is what I'm gonna go do it. So he sails off in the spring of 877. And 5 years later, he returns. This is 2 years longer than he meant to be gone. And it turns out that he was held up in Middle Earth because Gilgalad needed his aid. And so Gilgalad sends a letter back with Aldarion for Meneldor, telling him, like, hey, thank you for allowing your son to stay longer than intended. He's been helping me with some things. And here we kind of see this, like, glimpse of they don't know it, but Sauron is starting to cause some trouble in Middle Earth. And that's why Aldarion was there longer than intended because he was helping figure out what to do next there. And in seeing this, Meneldor is finally like, oh, there's some value in going back to Middle Earth. My son's been there all this time. He has relationships over there. He knows what's going on. I have no idea what's happening or how to handle this. Maybe Aldarion should become king now. Okay, so that's happening over here. Aldarion, when he gives this message to Meneldor, Meneldor gives him the cold shoulder. And so Aldarion's like, fine, I'm going home. He goes to his home in Armenelos, which is shut down. There is nothing there. So he's like, okay, my wife is in Amedier with our daughter. So him and one of his crew members who also lives in the area, they ride off to Amedier. Now, at this point, and Calame is 9 years old. And Calame has only seen one boy, one male being in her 9 years of existence. So Erendis has closed down Armenelos, has gone over to Emerie, has dismissed all of her male servants, only has female servants. She is a bitter, bitter woman at this point. And she imbues and just pukes out all of that bitterness onto her daughter and Calame, who only ever seen one boy, and that boy actually got in trouble for even being in their area because no man is allowed near this home. And Calame, because of her mother, is also very bitter and jaded towards men. Not exactly the warm welcome that Aldarion is hoping for. So Aldarion and his this crewmate head in that direction. They split off. The crew member goes off to his home. Aldarion's going off to his home. Aldarion gets to a bitter, cold Hellcroxe home. His wife just gives him cold shoulder and like, I see that you're here. Leaves. The servants, all female, serve him a dinner that he eats entirely by himself. He does not get to see on Calame. And then he realizes, like, I am not welcomed here. So he goes to bed in a separate room from Erendis, goes to bed, wakes up the next morning, tells Erendis, I'm leaving. I want to see my daughter. If Erendis had her way, he would never see Ancalame. But he's asked, and she does have to recognize that he is to be king. She can't exactly like reject his request, and Calame is heir to the throne. And so he's getting ready to leave, and Calame comes down. She doesn't know who this guy is. No fault of her own, right? She's 9 years old. He's been gone since she was 4. So no fault of her own. This is a stranger to him, but she's also never seen a man, and her mother is very cold towards even the idea of males. And Calame's not very friendly with Aldarion. Now, Aldarion doesn't tell her that he is her father, but he does tell her, like, very, like, try to be very sweet that she is to be Queen of Numenor, and that I'm sure, her father is very proud of her. And she just kind of like, yeah, whatever. So he leaves. Now he's told Arendis that he's going to go back to Romena, but he actually goes west. And so she just sees this and starts crying because she just thinks he's just lying to her. Well, actually, Aldarion is going towards the crew member that had rode with him. Now, when he gets to this guy, he sees this beautiful, warm welcome that this crew member has received. The whole village is celebrating him. He's dancing with his wife. There's this big feast. It's just a happy moment. Well, the crew member sees Aldarion, so he comes up to him and says, Captain, is there anything I can do for you? And Aldarion's like, no, but I want you to have this to give to your wife. And he's like, are you sure? And Aldarion says, yes, I think she would greatly appreciate it. So he takes his gift to his wife. It's a ruby. Obviously, this was intended for Erendis, but Erendis is being horrendous to him, and he gives the gift away. So he goes back to Ravenna, and he lives in his houseboat. Well, Maneldor finally comes up to him, and he's like, I'm so sorry for everything. Clearly, there was value in you wanting to go sailing. Clearly, there's value in interacting with Middle Earth and being a part of the goings on over there. I have no idea what to do. You need to become king. And so Aldarion's like, are you sure? Because this whole time, Menelder has been very clear that Aldarion does not know how to be king, that he only knows how to man, or how to captain men who also enjoy sailing. He doesn't know anything about women. Like, he's just this terrible leader. And here Menelder is like changing his tune, saying, no, I have no idea what to do. You have to take over. And so, in the year of 883, Aldarion becomes king of Numenor. And he remains in Armanelos. Him and Erendis never see each other again. And after some time, he calls for and Calame to come reside in Armenelos because she needs to learn how to become queen. So Aldarion changes some laws around so that the eldest child becomes the heir and not just the eldest male. And Calame is going to become heir to the throne of Numenor. And that is the story of Aldarion and Erendis. It's awful. It's so sad. Erendis lives in Emerie by herself. She dies an old, bitter woman. And Calame is also a bitter, selfish woman who becomes a very selfish queen. So the two sisters that Aldarion had, one of them has a son who, if things were laid out differently, would have become heir to the throne and kind of threatens and Calame a little bit. And then Calame's like, well, I'm gonna get married, so you can't have the throne. And so she like manipulates this poor kid and marries him, and he realizes, ah, I was just a pawn the whole time. In any progress that Aldarion had made with Middle Earth, when Ancalame becomes queen, she doesn't pick up any of that stuff. She just lets it all go to the crapshoot. She doesn't care and doesn't mess with it. So, yeah, she's a real gem. Real gem. And that is the story of the Mariner's Wife. There are people in the comments who wanted me to read this and were excited for me to read this, and I just have to say, do you not like me? This is a terrible story. This story is so frustrating. It really grinds my gears, okay? So Aldarion is clear from the very beginning that he wants to sail. He has a love for the sea. He wants to live in a houseboat. That's what he wants to do. He's always very clear about it. And yet, every single member of his family is like, I can fix this. I can change this. And no one is just like, he likes to see. Let's make that work. Like, let's be supportive of what he likes. No, they're all like, you need to do it this way and in our time. Amarion, for a bit, is very supportive of Aldarion, but even then, after a while, she just kind of backs off because, I mean, him and Neldor get into it. So the only person that I can say, like, okay, maybe you have a right to be concerned is Meneldor because Aldarion is to be king of Numenor. He kind of needs to be in Numenor for longer than 10 minutes, you know? So I can understand Meneldor's concern looking out for the people of Numenor. So I can kind of understand that. Almarion loves her son. I don't doubt that. I just think she's a meddler a bit. And then when it comes to Erendis, this is what really bugs me. She knew who she was marrying. She knew Aldarion loved the sea. And while Aldarion is trying to compromise with her, making a home for her in Mediate, like the opposite location of where he would want to be, he's wanting to make her happy and appease her by giving her a home that she would like, trying to entice her to come on voyages with him and saying, like, I know you love the trees. Come with me to Middle Earth. You'll see the trees there, and they're beautiful, and you'll love them. Let's go do that. And she's just like, no, no, no. And it's just, and the fact that she straight up in the book says, maybe now that we have a daughter, he'll stay to have a son. Like, that just feels all sorts of manipulative and it irritates me. And yes, there can be an argument for Aldarion being selfish. Sure. But let's keep in mind, when Aldarion becomes king, he doesn't sail any. He sees where his responsibilities lie in Numenor. He's king now. And he had said, early on in the book that if you pressure him to do something, he's going to pull back more. He's not someone that you can pressure into doing anything. And I think we see that time and time again. He tries with Erendis, he tries to give her what she wants and do the things that she wants, but she never reciprocates that. I'll take that back. She goes on one sailing trip with him around the edge of Numenor, and that's it. And she's like, I hated it. I never want to do that again. Ew, don't put me on a boat ever again. And she just degrades what he likes. And so, on the one hand, I can look at Aldarion and be like, dude, why did you marry her? She clearly does not share your interests. And then on the other hand, I can look at Erendis and being like, you knew who you were marrying. Why are you trying to change him? So yeah, let this be a warning for every single person out there. If you love a person as they are now, love them as they are now. Don't look at them to try and fix them or change them, because then you're going to end up just like Horrendous' mother said, either resenting each other or not being who you fell in love with to begin with. And that's what happened here. And it's just, sure, don't do that. People aren't projects. They're not somebody you do fix. You either are there with them in the good times and bad times, you share their interests, you share their dislikes. You don't try to fix them to be who you want them to be, because then they're not them anymore. So yeah, there you go. There's my rant for this story. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have more sympathy for Rendis, please put it in the comments. Let me know, because at this moment I have very little sympathy for Erendis, especially since she took all of her bitterness and put it on her daughter. But if you have an argument for her, let me know. Let's talk about it. But otherwise, I hope that you all have a wonderful, blessed week, and may your homes be filled with food and cheer. Bye.